Now, there's been another seismic shift in the world of cryptocurrencies, with the value of Bitcoin shaken down again, this time dropping to $6,000. That's almost the same price it was back in November before its meteoric rise. The digital money has been getting much attention lately. Now, the rapid fluctuation of Bitcoin is drawing comparisons to the first recorded economic bubble, which was back in the 17th century during the so-called tulip mania. That was when the price of tulips mirrored the path Bitcoin is taking now, with a huge spike in value before plummeting back to its original starting price. Well, let's discuss this live with the economics professor at Kingston University, Steve Keen. Thanks for joining us, sir. Good to have you on the program. I mean, I'm certainly glad I didn't invest in Bitcoin now when I was thinking about it, given the drop. But of course, it's back to the price it was in November before it went right up again. So, I mean, what do you think about the drop? Is there potential for another rise?
Oh, it's probably the most gambled and possibly in terms of the actual type of behaviour that's driving the price up and down, the most illegal speculative financial asset on the planet, because the things which are driving the price up and down are actually illegal on actual stock markets. You can't you can't do what they call pump and dump on a stock market. You can't coordinate a bunch of people to buy into the asset to make it rise, to send out news messages, to be paid to send out those messages, and then once the price has risen, to sell and cream off the money that's been made by people who came in late who weren't part of the party. That's quite a regular part of the behaviour of Bitcoin. So it'll go up and down, but I think the long run trend is towards basically the value of one tulip.
It's certainly something that's divided opinions, hasn't it, about its future. Let's just take a listen to a couple of the most high-profile ones.
I do think that I think what's going on definitely will come to a bad ending.
Bitcoin is better than currency in that you don't have to be physically in the same place.
Well, that was Warren Buffett and Bill Gates there, quite polar views, it seems, on Bitcoin. I mean, why do you think it's divided opinion so much among, you know, people from investors to some of the world's richest millionaires?
Well, there are people who are quite opposed to the whole idea of government-based money, and who are also opposed to the obvious, fraudulent shenanigans that the financial sector went on with credit-based money back in 2007. In fact, there's an attack at both parties, effectively, in the very first Bitcoin. It includes a comment on the Chancellor, therefore representing the government in the UK, about to do the second bailout of the banks. So that this was a huge part of it was a rebellion against fiat currency and credit money. But it's been badly designed. It's based on an analogy to gold, which itself is false, because it's very easy to make another Bitcoin technology, as we've seen. It's impossible to make more gold. And it's also not true that gold was ever money. So what they've built in is a currency which is based on a set of fallacies. And the biggest one to me is, to be money, you have to be able to enable transactions. But the maximum number of transactions that can be supported on the Bitcoin network per second is about 20. Now, there's probably that many transactions in a large suburb in London, and they're talking about it taking over as a global currency. It simply isn't going to happen.
I mean, is it too early to be sounding the alarm, though, about the death of Bitcoin? I mean, it's still worth quite a lot of money, isn't it, after all?
Oh yeah, people who bought in early have done very, very well. I mean, Max Kaiser was recommending buying it at $3, and if I'd listened to Max on one of those shows, I would have sold out quite nicely, even at the price it's selling at now. But ultimately, the only long-term value for Bitcoin is if it becomes an alternative to currencies. And so long as it only supports a trivial, and I really mean trivial, number of transactions per second, it simply can't become money. Now, in that sense, it's a bit like a tulip. What can you do with a tulip apart from plant it in a garden and watch it look lovely and then slowly die? And I think that's what's happening with Bitcoin as well.
It's a topic that's really hardly been out the headlines the last few months, hasn't it? Every week there's seemed to be a discussion, a new controversy. I mean, has all the attention around Bitcoin been justified, do you think?
Well, it's certainly created a stir because, as I said, there's a libertarian community that wants to support a complete alternative to government-based money, and you'll see a lot of the tweets, like those from Max Kaiser, saying that it's going to completely eliminate fiat currencies. So there's this libertarian side to it, and that's a large part of where its support group has come from. And it is an interesting technology, and the blockchain concept is something that may be effective as a way of replacing the back offices of banks at some stage. But the fact that it is so slow, consumes so much energy, and handles so few transactions means that it can't ultimately be what people are claiming it to be. So another blockchain technology may well succeed, but I simply can't see Bitcoin being effective.
There's a lot of changes right now, though, in the financial world, isn't there? I mean, from countries moving away from the petrodollar to the Shanghai, the new stock exchange, the countries buying up gold, etc. You mentioned an alternative cryptocurrency could work. If Bitcoin perhaps reforms somehow, is there a future for it? I mean, what do you think is the long-term future, or the medium-term future perhaps might be easier to predict, of Bitcoin?
I think it's ultimately going to collapse to a virtually zero value because it can only handle a tiny number of transactions. If I wanted to buy Lithuania, Bitcoin would be a good way to do that, but I can only manage 20 transactions maximum per second. That is simply not currency. It's only going to be there as an effective means of transfer for extremely large transactions, $50 million, $100 million at a time. And you're not going to be buying coffee with it at Costco, particularly when the transaction fees are now running at something like of the order of $10 or $20 per transaction, no matter how many Bitcoin are involved. So it's got so many design flaws. And in that sense, it's like a lost leader. It's the first for new technology. Interesting idea, but I don't think it's going to work.
Steve Keen, economics professor at Kingston University. Great to get your take, as always, on this. Thanks for joining us.